Namaskaraha and welcome to our next session of the yogic life. So this is a subject that we have already discussed in the past, but I thought I'll bring it up again because it's a very important topic that that we don't contemplate upon, right? So let us kind of revisit this topic and kind of revise it one more time. So we understand that human beings, they have three-stari astitva. They have existence in three spheres, and yogic life addresses all the three spheres. Right? Yogic life leads to expansion and development in all the three spheres: the physical sphere, the mental sphere, and the spiritual sphere. Sharirik, manasik, and adhyatmik. Right? On the physical plane, the benefits of yogic life, we have talked about that in the past a lot, about yogic food, sattvic ahara, yoga asanas, and then daily vyayama and nirjalopvasa. So we have seen the benefits of that, and the result of following these were that we saw that we'll have an excellent health, physical health, in the absence of chronic medications, and then physical strength, energy, stamina, flexibility, digestion is good, and overall longevity of life, right? So all of these are the natural outcomes of following yogic life in the physical sphere, right? So we generally, when we start the yogic life classes, we start with those discussions on the physical plane because they provide a base, right? The mind resides in the body, so, and the body is the adhara, is the base for moving ahead in yogic life, and they give results in all the three spheres, right? Although they are primarily physical in activity, but they may make people feel dramatically different, and also your relationship with the world changes dramatically, right? So the physical sphere we have already talked about. The physical body, however, is like, it's limited in its ability to develop and expand. It is always a particular size, and when the human beings have this desire, the innate desire for expansion, then the primary duty, what is the duty of the human body? The human body, the physical body, is to serve as a healthy base on which this expansion and development can happen, right? So there are people in this world who think that the physical body is actually the goal of life. They're all mistaken, right? Like, for instance, we have the hatha yogis who spend all their time only doing asanas, right? There are so many yoga studios who are only doing asanas, and then there are other people who are extremely involved in doing exercises, and they think that is the goal of life. So no doubt these are all important part of life, but they are not the end goal. The physical body is an adhara. It is the base in which the mind resides, right? So that is the physical aspect. Now let's move into the other two aspects, the mental aspect and the spiritual aspect. The human mind has a thirst for the infinite. We have this desire for the infinite, which ultimately goes into the spiritual world, and in that spiritual world, that is where we find the infinite. That is the ultimate goal of life, and this ultimate goal of life is embedded in the meaning of yoga, right? So when we say what is yoga, we say sanyogo yoga ityuktau jivatma paramatmanoh. Ityukte jivatma paramatmanoh sanyogah yoga. So the union of the jivatma with the paramatma is yoga. So that union occurs at the level of jivatma with paramatma. That is to say, that is beyond the mind, right? It is beyond the mind. This occurs through sadhana, where the mind ideates on Paramapurusha, that infinite entity, then that ideation ultimately brings the mind beyond itself to the infinite. So we have discussed about the physical level food yogasanas, discussed in depth, and we are all experimenting with it and having experiences with it. And we also discussed the psycho-spiritual level, in which is embedded the practice of yoga. So the mind has no shape of its own, and it takes the ideation of the infinite entity, and by that ideation it moves beyond itself. That is what we call as the psycho-spiritual, because it is utilizing the mind as a tool for getting beyond the mind. Ultimately one has to move beyond the mind to Purusha. So it's Manasatit. So we have discussed the physical aspect, we have discussed the spiritual aspect, that is sadhana. The physical body acts as a healthy base on which this expansion of the mind towards the infinite can occur. So if the body is not in a good shape, if somebody had a stroke and if they're they lose the functioning of their left arm and left leg, let's say, right, then, or their half of their face loses functioning, the body is crippled, then it is unable to provide an adequate base for the mind to do sadhana, right? So the health of the body is very, very important, but it is only the base, right? But it is, and the psycho-spiritual level that we have discussed, in which through sadhana the human existence ultimately moves beyond the mind and merges in the Shuddha Purusha. But we said the human existence is three-stariya, right? So physical aspect, mental aspect, and spiritual aspect. Physical aspect and mental aspect we have talked about, and now we are going to talk about the middle one, the mental aspect. So what do we mean by expansion? So yoga means, yoga we say is a movement from imperfection to perfection. It's a movement of the finite to the infinite, right? So what do we mean when we are talking about the occurring at on the mental level? So what role does the mind play in the yogic life? So we have the mind, body, and the spirit, right? Mind, body, and Atma. So what about the mind, right? The functioning at the mental level does play a very important role in the yogic life. Here we are talking about the mind in its normal daily functioning in the world, right? So the mind also has an important role to play, just like the body, which functions as an adhara or a base that supports spiritual practice and ultimately helps in merger of the jivatma with Paramatma, right? Similarly, the mind also plays a supportive function for that process, right? Mind also plays a role as a supportive medium for that process, right? So what do we mean here by supportive medium? The mind, it provides an environment in which the sadhana, spiritual sadhana, is practiced. So in order for the mind to properly perform this spiritual sadhana, the mind has to be pure, right? If the mind is trapped in various sorts of mental bondages, then the resultant psychic environment will not be conducive to the psycho-spiritual expansion towards infinite, right? That is why we give a lot of importance to Chitta Shuddhi. We give a lot of importance to having a pure mind, right? If the mind is not pure, right, if it has mental bondages, then one cannot properly engage in sadhana. One will not be doing real sadhana. If the mind is trapped, then we cannot do real sadhana. So we are actually talking about the mukti of the buddhi. The buddhi or the intellect gets trapped in array of dogmas and attachments which prevent it from expanding. So dogmas here mean bhava jadata, right? Because of this bhava jadata, wrong beliefs, the mind is trapped in bondages and it's not able to expand. So this bhava jadata in categorized in three categories, in three broad categories. So geo sentiment, social sentiment and human sentiment. Right here we are talking about an extremely important aspect of our spiritual progress. So we talked about the body, we talked about the movement of the jivatma via the process of sadhana. Now we are talking about the mind, right? So the mind has to engage with the world. So we live in the world, mind has to engage in the world. And how is it going to engage with the world? So the problem that we are actually facing is that there are all kinds of traps in which the mind falls, and due to which it keeps the mind from creating a proper environment for psycho-spiritual expansion towards the infinite. And these traps, these bondages are called as geo-sentiment, social sentiment and human sentiment. So ultimately what we're talking about is the liberation of the intellect. So that is the subject we're going to talk today. So we'll just get an introduction of that. So yoga on the mental level, expansion on the mental level means liberation of the intellect from all the limited thought patterns which entrap it. For example, in geo sentiment we have an attachment or sentiment for a particular land and the people who reside there, right? So if one has an attachment for the people who live in one's region because they are living in that region, then this can take the form of nationalism, right? That's very, very common. People feel a certain relation to those who are residents in the same country or the same area, right? So in the case of nationalism, what happens is that you'll feel brotherhood with those people who are residents of the same country. You feel closeness with the people because of the physical location, and that imposes a limitation on the mind, right? It results in the lack of brotherly feeling towards those who do not live in that region. So that is what it does. So when you have this feeling of nationalism, when you have deep attachment to your country, and at the same time you are thinking the people of those people who are outside my country do not belong to me, that creates it physically imposes a tremendous limitation on the mind. It creates a line or a boundary. It creates a line beyond which the mind is unable to cross. So one feels closeness to those who live in one's country, and as a result don't feel closeness to those who do not live in the country, right? And that limitation on the mind is called as geo sentiment, right? So that can also manifest as a particular state or a region, right? A lot of people have attachment to a particular state or particular region. So you can see that a lot in, for instance, it's there in every state. Like for instance in India, like you can see the people of Karnataka, they, right? Oh, they say that they have so much of pride that I'm a Kannadiga. They say I'm a Kannadiga. And then people who are in Tamil Nadu, they say, oh, I'm a Tamilian, right? So they fight based on the language, they fight based on the where they live, the state, right? So then they even feel for the country, right? We have seen all of this. So that is what is the geo sentiment. Next level from there is the social sentiment, in which people feel closeness for those in a particular social circle, right? For example, if you're a Hindu, then you're my brother, you're my sister. If you're not a Hindu, then you're not my brother and sister. So if you're a Christian, then you're not my brother. That kind of animosity towards other people, because they don't belong to your social circle, it can be based on race or religion or based on any other criteria. So this again leads to a feeling of brotherhood or feeling of closeness because of a membership to a particular group, which is not defined by a physical location. So geo sentiments is a little bit narrow because you're only having affiliation, closeness to people of a particular country. Whereas in social sentiment, the people may be living anywhere in the world, but if they are Christians, then they may be brothers, right? People who belong to Christianity, they are all my brothers, but who are not Christianity, they're not my brothers. So this actually increases the population, right? It's not only of a particular country, but they can be anywhere, right? The geo sentiment is defined by physical location. Everybody who lives in Mexico, they are close to me because they live in Mexico. That is nationalism. But here we are talking about people feeling closeness to others because they are members of the same religion, right? Here it is not based on physical boundaries, but based on the social boundaries. So this leads to a feeling of brotherhood for those in a particular social circle, but excludes other people who are not part of the circle. So this is the second one, social sentiment. And the third one is the human sentiment, in which we feel closeness to human beings, but not for those living beings which are not human. We don't feel closeness to plants and animals, right? So each of these circles, the geo sentiment, social sentiment, and human sentiment, each of these are progressively more expansive than the other. Geo sentiment, it's a little bit more narrow. Social sentiment, it's a little bit even more wider because it includes more number of people wherever they are located. And then the next one is the human sentiment, is that I have affiliation to all human beings. It's even more expansive, but I don't have affiliation for plants and animals. The circumference of the circle is more expanded. Naturally, the geo sentiment is the most crude. It takes a physical territory and imposes on one's mind the limitation of feeling closeness on the basis of that physical location, the physical territory. Social sentiment is more expanded, although it is also a limitation. People from one's religion may be living all over the world, right? So this is also an extreme limitation on the mind. It is more expanded than the geo sentiment, and this is what is called the social sentiment. And then the human sentiment is still more, in which one feels a certain closeness with all human beings. That's more an elevated sentiment, but still it is a sentiment. Somebody may feel, for example, closeness with human beings, but still eat meat and feel that animals are not coming within the periphery of brotherhood. So they don't feel any relationship with animals or with plants, right? Ultimately, when the human intellect is liberated from these limiting sentiments, then it feels openness. Then it feels very relieved. It feels open. It feels oneness and brotherhood with all the creatures of this universe. This is what is called as true universality. And this is the environment in which sadhana can best thrive. So when the mind is liberated from all these limitations, in such an environment, a person can do sadhana, right? Sadhana is done very well, right? So the concept that the yogic life itself is conducive to the liberation of intellect, right? As the yogic life is based on the feeling that all the beings are offspring of that Shuddha Purusha, right? All beings are made of that Shuddha Purusha. Shuddha Purusha is the samagri out of which this whole universe is made. We emerge from that Shuddha Purusha through the qualifying process of Prakriti on Purusha in the Sanchar Dhara, and on the basis of this yogic science, human mind becomes liberated from these limiting attachments, develops a feeling of oneness with all the beings of this universe, and this is the yoga on mental plane. So we are talking about yoga on three levels: physical level, mental level, and spiritual level. So the yogic life in the physical plane creates a base for the mind and the atma to thrive. Then liberating the intellect from all these false limiting sentiments, dogmas, which are beliefs beyond which the mind is not permitted to go. So that is the yoga on the mental plane. And when we work on creating a proper environment for the body as well as for the mind, then the next level is the psycho-spiritual level, ultimately doing sadhana, taking the bhava of the Shuddha Purusha, of the infinite entity, and taking the bhava of the Shuddha Purusha becomes easier, becomes far, far easier by creating a proper environment at the physical level and at the mental level. If we don't do that, then this process of sadhana becomes extremely difficult, right? So the process of sadhana can be much, much easier. This extremely difficult process becomes much easier by following the Yoga Nishtha Jivanam, and it is facilitated by yoga in the physical and psychic spheres, right? So this concept is very, very important, and we need to think about it. So whether we are living in any part of the world, right, people have these kind of limitations of the mind based on the setting where we have lived for a long time, right, so, and also that is how people have been trained, the society, to have affiliation to the people of the same country, right? Nationalism, patriotism, all of those isms, right? But ultimately, people who are on the spiritual path, these isms create a limitation of the mind, and we need to get freedom from these dogmas or beliefs. Only then we can progress in spiritual life. So that is what I wanted to cover today. So now let us actually go to our topic, Yama and Niyama. So we were actually talking about the marriages, right? So we said that marriage is one of the main backbone of the society. Marriage is very, very important in the society, right? At the individual level, we have to look at each situation to see whether marriage is appropriate for somebody or not, right? So those who are married, they should be able to support the family financially. If you're not going to be able to feed the children, then it does not make sense to have children. So the overall view here is that family is very important component of the society, right? So marriage is very important. So marriage does have a utility value which we cannot overlook. But in order to be a productive person in marriage, one has to be able to materially support the family, right? That's one thing. Emotionally, one has to be able to be a positive member of the family. If somebody has a disease, a very serious disease, a mental disease, then it is not proper for them to marry, right? So it can be a bipolar disease or some other mental disease which is serious. So mental disorders make it unfavorable to consider marriage, right? So there are people who are constantly engaged in the fulfillment of an ideal, right? Everybody should have an idea, higher ideal, no doubt. Everybody should be following the yogic life. Everybody should understand that what is human dharma, that we have a desire to realize the infinite entity, and we should all live for that higher ideal. There is actually no doubt about that. If somebody is going to be constantly engaged in Atma Moksha and Jagat Hit, and because there are certain mundane duties that one has a family, one has to be there, right? And those don't go against working for the fulfillment of a higher ideal. But if one is dedicated oneself in such a way that one is going to be traveling all the time, that one is going to be in different countries, right, attend to the victims of earthquake or the places where there is drought or famine or any other calamity or whatever, if somebody is going to be dedicated in a way to serving the society and thousands of miles away, then, right, and their spouse and children are living somewhere else, they may not be able to attend to their family. In such a situation, those who are dedicated to serving society, it is better for them not to get married, right? So that way they can completely dedicate for what they are doing, right? If somebody is a scientist and they are in the laboratory all the time, right, they're constantly working in the laboratory, then they will not obviously have time to take care of the family or the children, right? So being dedicated in a family life is not a joke. It's an important duty to attend to, And if somebody is not going to be able to attend to that duty properly, then they should not engage in that duty, right? That is what is expressed in the paragraph that we saw last week. Those who are constantly engaged in the fulfillment of an ideal in such a way that it will obstruct their ability to attend to their family duties, then they should carefully think about it, right? It is better for them not to engage in marriage, right? So marriages of such people are harmful to the society in many cases, right? If somebody is not properly taking care of their children, then the children may not grow up to be proper human beings and properly contributing to the society. So having children is a big responsibility, and when you have children, you have to raise them properly to be human beings and not animals in human form, but humans in human form. Otherwise, don't have children. If you're going to raise children who are going to become drug addicts and thieves, right, then it's better not to have children at all, right? If somebody is married and has children, then they have to raise the children properly so that they become humans in human form. They become leaders of the society, right? So marriage is a very serious thing, and attending to family is extremely important. If people are not ready for that, then they should not have family, right? So those who get married should be dedicated to the duties that are before them. If they cannot dedicate themselves, then they should not get married at all, right? So you can see that in the world, in different parts of the world, people are in live-in relationship, they don't get married, right? And then they have children, and then they separate themselves, and then the children are not raised properly, right? So, and because of that, they don't get the proper values, so then they remain as a pashus, right? They don't contribute to the society, right? So if you're dedicated to something, some social activity, right, then it's better for you not to engage in marriage. But generally speaking, if you're ready, and at the individual level, if you're ready and your circumstances permit and you wish to get married, then you can get married, and then you become a responsible person. You take care of your children, and you have a responsibility to the small family, right? So the notion of not getting married is a very negative thing, right? People who say that they don't want to get married, that means they don't have any sense of responsibility, any sense of duty in the society, and they totally degenerate. So that is a very negative side, right? So if somebody wants to dedicate 100% for some higher ideal, then they may not be able to take care of children, so then they should not get married. Otherwise, as a general member of the society, marriage is very important. It helps people to become responsible, right? So that is what we covered in the last class. We can actually move on from there today. Okay, you can take the last paragraph, Bhagini. It has been said earlier.
It has been said earlier, and it is being repeated, that one has to exercise control in every sphere of life, whether big or small. Such control doesn't imply killing the desire, but controlling it. Desires and tendencies are natural attributes of a living being. Therefore, those who want to kill the desires should better adopt some easy method of committing suicide instead of pursuing a difficult method of spiritual practices. I don't find any reason to support the so-called brahmacharya who for those who are. Bhagini, can you please show the next? Seva Sapta Vaishnava, or who believes in Purana, because their deities Shiv, Vishnu, Krishna, and others. Where what is commonly known as worldly people, in the Purana, the names of their wives and children are also mentioned. In this paragraph, we are like rusted to have control in every aspect of our life. The control doesn't mean killing the desire, but instead instead control it. And because we are living being and desires and tendencies are our natural habits or attributes. So those who want to kill the desires should better adopt some easy method of committing suicide instead of pursuing a difficult method of spiritual practices. And the author doesn't support any brahmacharya who believe in Puranas, Seva, Sakta or Vaishnava because their deities were worldly people, and because in Puranas their wives and children are also mentioned, so they were worldly people. Bhagini, can you explain that how the killing desires and then the deities are connected, and the line that want to kill desires should be better adopt some easy method of committing suicide?
Yeah. So here what it's saying is there are people, this whole topic is on brahmacharya, right? So there are people who follow the so-called brahmacharya. That means they don't get married. They say that they have to preserve the semen, and they don't get married. They're so-called brahmacharis, and these so-called brahmacharis, they are the followers of Shaiva, Sakta or Vaishnava. They are either the follower of Shiva, Shakti or Vishnu, or they believe in the Puranas. So if they are following the so-called brahmacharya, and they are belonging to each of these sects, the Shaiva, Shakta or Vaishnava sects or Puranas, but their deities, the Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna, they are all married, right? In the Puranas we can see that all of them are married and they have children. So if that is the case, if their deities are all married and having children, and why are you supporting a philosophy which says you should not get married? So that is what it's saying. So, yeah. So let me actually.
What about those lines? That line, who want to kill desires? But
yeah, let me explain. Let me address that. So here, the main crux of this paragraph is that we need to understand what is brahmacharya, right? So what is brahmacharya? Is brahmani vicharanam is brahmacharya. If we don't understand the true sense of brahmacharya and we say that brahmacharya means not to get married, right? That is a incorrect understanding. So following brahmacharya in the true sense has nothing to do whether one is grahastha or a sannyasi, right? It has everything to do with whether one is a human in human form or animal in human form. Everybody has a human face and 2 hands and 2 feet, but they should live in such a way that it is supportive of what it is to be truly a human being inside and outside. That is, we should be leading a yogic life. That is the spirit. So in this world, all of us have indriyas. We have indriyas and they're all outward facing, and everybody has these worldly attachments, right? Everybody has 50 vrittis, right? I think we might have talked about this, 50 different tendencies, dharma, artha, kama, moksha and all of that. And we have the vrittis, and we have the 7 chakras, right? And we have the Agnya chakra, which is the paravritti and aparavritti, right? So Agnya chakra is the seat of the unit mind. So the Agnya chakra has a paravritti, which is the desire for the supreme entity, which is the supreme knowledge, right? And all the other 49 vrittis, right? In the yogic life, they are not to be suppressed or they should not be destroyed, right? So what we are talking about is, when we say we have to exercise control in every sphere of life, when we exercising control doesn't mean killing the desire. You're not killing the desire. So when you engage in sadhana, when you engage in yogic life, when you engage in sadhana, and when you are you know, focusing on Paramapurusha, concentrating on Paramapurusha, then what you are really doing is you are channelizing all your vrittis towards the 50th vritti, which is the Paravritti, which is towards Paramapurusha. By constantly engaging in sadhana and practicing it, what happens is that your mind is now naturally not interested in these physical objects. It's not interested in the attractions of the world. So there, what you're doing is it is automatically getting niyantran. It is getting control. It is not you're killing a desire, right? It is the desire itself is not there anymore. By engaging in yoga sadhana, over a period of time, you'll realize that your likings change and your dislikings. What were your dislikings before that change? Likings and dislikings change, and that is the result of the yoga sadhana. So you're not killing your desires, right? But you're channelizing all your vrittis towards the 50th vritti, which is the paravritti, which is towards Paramapurusha. So then all your vrittis naturally get controlled, and when through the practice of the real brahmacharya, one realizes that all the things in this world are made of that Shuddha Purusha. Shuddha Purusha is the only samagri. Shuddha Purusha is the only nitya vastu. Everything else in this universe is anitya vastu, right? They're all temporary and transient. By such a realization, what happens is that one's mind remains engaged with Paramapurusha all the time, and by doing so, naturally the worldly desires, right, they get controlled. They don't assume a greater role than what is appropriate for them. So supposing a yogi, if he's hungry, he needs food, right? Like just like anybody else, he needs food, but that food will not take a larger than life role compared to somebody else who is constantly thinking about food. Food is required for survival. For him to engage in sadhana, he needs to maintain his body. To that extent, food is required. He is not living for food, right? So he is not constantly thinking of food. He is not going from one restaurant to another restaurant and thinking about what to make for dinner, what they are going to make for tomorrow, right? So that is uncontrolled behavior, right? It should not be wildly out of control, right? So, but on the other hand, one should not destroy that desire, right? Hunger has a role. If somebody doesn't feel hunger when they need food, then it is not good. Hunger has an important role to play in life. If somebody has proper relationship with food, then their hunger comes to express itself when it is appropriate, right? It's the body's signal telling the mind that it is time for food, and that is the proper way, right? It should be like that, right? At the time when somebody is hungry, they have to take food and it will be digested, right? It will be digested very well, and in that situation we call the proper use of that signal, that hunger signal. The mind heard that signal, it took proper food and it properly digested that food, and so the whole work was done. So that should be the case, but somebody should neither abuse that faculty nor they should try to ignore it and suppress it. But when somebody is actually really following the brahmacharya bhava, then what happens? All the other vrittis, the 49 other vrittis, are channelized towards the 50th vritti, which is the dominating vritti, the paravritti, towards Paramapurusha. Then somebody becomes a human in human form, right? So that is what we are calling as, we have to control and not killing the desires, right? If we have to kill the desires, we cannot live. If we are constantly killing our desires, then we won't have the desire to live, right? We will think of committing suicide, and such a person will not be in a state to pursue any spiritual practices. Forget about spiritual practices. If a person is wanting to kill his desires, then he will have no motivation to live, right? So we cannot kill our desires, and killing desires is not the right approach. So when, like a child, when it is playing with a toy, when the child is playing with a toy and is very much engrossed in the toy, then the mother cannot pull the toy. If the mother pulls the toy, then the child is going to cry. If the child is playing with the car keys, right? If the child is playing with the car keys and mother wants to go out, and if she tries to take the car keys from the child's hand, the child is going to cry. But on the other hand, if the mother gives the child a better toy, right, the mother gives the child a better toy, then the child will naturally give up the car keys, right? Like that, ordinarily human beings have pashu vrittis, and they're constantly engaged with the world and constantly running after things, right? And if you tell such an individual, stop running after the things, do you think he will listen? He will not listen. That is how he is, and he is going to run after those things. So how do we, if we pull away those things, if we pull away those things, he may not have the desire to live. So what is the right approach is that when he enters the yogic life and when he starts following the yoga sadhana, when he starts ideating on Paramapurusha, slowly his mind changes. His mind changes. There is change happening in his mind, whether we know or not, right? We may be thinking that I'm doing sadhana, nothing happened to me. You do sadhana 1 day, 2 days, nothing happened to me. What is this? It's just waste. It's not like that. So it is like when you're sitting in the train, and the windows are all closed, right? The windows are all closed. You don't feel like the train is moving. You're just sitting there and you're not seeing that it is moving, and you feel it's not moving. But that doesn't mean the train is not moving. The train is moving. So similarly, when you engage in sadhana, even though you feel like nothing is happening, right? You're ideating in Paramapurusha and sincerely trying to connect with Paramapurusha. You, after sadhana, you feel, oh, nothing happened. Oh, what happened? Nothing happened. But it is not like that. It is like a train. It is constantly moving. There are subtle changes which are happening in your mind, and over a period of time, after you finish doing sadhana, you will realize that your mind becomes very light. You're experiencing happiness, right? And also what happens as a result of doing sadhana sincerely, your mind changes. Your likings and dislikings change. So the desires that you had for the worldly objects, they naturally change. So that is what it is. They naturally change, and you give up those desires, just like the child giving up the car keys, right, because it got a better toy. Similarly, the attraction for Paramapurusha increases when that bhakti bhava, love for Paramapurusha increases by doing sadhana and engaging in yogic life. Then automatically the desire towards all the other things, objects of the world, slowly decreases. So that is why one should be dedicated in doing sadhana, right? It is very important to do sadhana. If you're not doing sadhana, then your whole life is waste, right? You will not experience anything that we're talking about here. So you have to be sincere in doing sadhana. One thing is doing the food and physical aspect, right? Following the sattvic ahara, those are all no doubt very important. But at the same time, one has to do sadhana. If you're not doing sadhana and asanas, right, you're only following the sattvic ahara, it is only the physical aspect. So the mental aspect and spiritual aspect, you haven't done anything. So you have to try to do sadhana in order to experience what is being said in this paragraph, that we cannot kill the desires, but we have to control it. Has it become clear, Bhagini?
Yes, Bhagini.
Okay. So destroying the desires is not proper, right? But just as much as glorifying or making it the center of one's life is also not proper, right? We can't make the desire the center of our life, nor we can destroy it. So either one is misguided. So by leading in a yogic life, you get the proper path, right? The desires become controlled, because now you have more desire towards Paramapurusha. The attraction to Paramapurusha is like a powerful magnet. So automatically you give up other things. It's quite natural. It happens very systematically. Okay, go to the next paragraph.
Dharma is based on satyat. Dharma saha na yatra na satyam.
So let me say dharma saha na yatra na satyam asti.
Dharma saha na yatra na satyam asti. Where there is no satya, there is no dharma. This peculiar interpretation of brahmacharya may contain anything and everything save except satya. Hence there is no dharma or brahma in it. But dharma is based on satya. Dharma, where there is no satya, there is no dharma. This interpretation of brahmacharya may contain anything or everything, except Satya. Like this whole sentence is also not true because there is not Satya in this sentence. So there is no dharma in this sentence.
No, no, not in this sentence. In the sentence sense, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that the line, the peculiar interpretation of brahmacharya.
The peculiar, if you interpret brahmacharya in a wrong way, then that doesn't have satya. It is not telling the truth. If you say brahmacharya means not to get married, then it is not telling the correct interpretation of brahmacharya. So it doesn't, that statement doesn't have satya, right? If it doesn't have satya, then it doesn't have dharma. It doesn't have dharma, it doesn't have brahma. Okay. Dharma is based on satya, means all the concepts we are talking about are all interlinked. That which is truly brahmacharya, the true brahmacharya is an expression of satya, is an expression of manava dharma. Dharma means the infinite desire. So that infinite desire and expression of brahmacharya, they are very, very closely related, right? So the truth of our own self is to stay with Paramapurusha, right? That is our dharma, to be with it. So when we use the word dharma, we are meaning something very specific. We are talking about Bhagavad dharma, Manava dharma. When we talk about dharma, it is not some interpretation of dharma which is out there, right? What we are talking about is the Manava dharma, right? Every object in this universe has its own dharma. Stone has its own dharma. Animals have their own dharma. Dharma means the quality without which it cannot stay, right? That thing is not that thing. Like fire has a burning quality. If something doesn't have the burning quality, we cannot call it as fire, right? So if there's no heat in fire, then you cannot call it as fire. So there is no heat in ice, and you cannot call ice fire, right? So human dharma is Bhagavad dharma, that is to attain that Paramapurusha, right? So we have to follow that human dharma. If we are true to ourselves, then we will follow that Bhagavata dharma, right? So over here what is being said is that something cannot be called as dharma if it doesn't have satyam in it, right? So dharma is actually based on satyam. If satyam is not there, then you cannot call something as dharma. That is why Paramatma is called as Satyam Shivam Sundaram, right? Satyam Shivam Sundaram, Satchit Anandaha, we say. Paramatma is Satyam, and dharma, that is to attain Paramapurusha, should be based on that Satyam, right? So dharma for different people for thousands of years have been profoundly misunderstood, and people have been deeply misguided on this point of what is dharma, right? The dharma is something which is universal and does not vary by person to person, and does not vary by circumstances, does not vary by time, right? It does not vary based on your status in the family life, right? The word dharma does not mean religion, it does not mean duty. It has a very, very specific sense which is beyond time and place, right? And it universally applies to everybody, right? To all human beings. It is dharma is what makes a human, right? So the dharma means the quality which all human beings have, right? Which other beings don't have, right? In human beings, what is the quality that they have which other beings don't have? That is the desire to know the infinite, and that is the dharma of human beings, and that is the Bhagavata dharma, right? And that Bhagavata dharma is based on satya, right? It is based on satya, and if there is no satya, then something cannot be called as dharma. Similarly, in interpretation of brahmacharya, if you can't just say anything and say this is brahmacharya, then it is something which is not based on satya. So the proper interpretation of brahmacharya should be based on satya, because it should intend what it means. So the true interpretation of brahmacharya is brahmani vicharanam, means that is moving in brahma, right? So okay, so that is what we are talking in this paragraph. Is it clear, Bhagini? Can you explain?
Yes, Bhagini. Yes.
Can you explain what you understood?
Yes, Bhagini. Like the discussion we have done for brahmacharya, that we shouldn't get married and all, that's not true, because our deities are also married if we talk about Puranas and all. So there is no Satya. Like these all things are not Satya, that we shouldn't get married, and if we are getting married then we cannot follow the brahmacharya. Then there is no Satya. So this thing is not dharma, because if there is no Satya then there is no dharma, and so that interpretation of brahmacharya is wrong, and there is no dharma in that.
Yeah, Bhagini, nicely said. Yeah, that is what it is. Yes, thank you. Let's take the next paragraph, Bhagini.
Humanity has to progress towards the ultimate reality by accepting what is truth. That is the path of a sadhaka, and that is the path of dharma. It may be a privilege to parasitic religious professional to deny what is simple truth in practical life, but thereby the sanctity of dharma cannot be maintained.
Sanctity of dharma. Sanctity.
Sanctity of dharma cannot be mentioned. It is not the path of satya, it is nothing but hypocrisy. Humanity has to accept the truth and move towards the ultimate reality, and that is only the path of sadhaka, the path of dharma. And Bhagini, what is parasitic? It may be privilege is parasitic.
Parasitic means okay, let me tell you, give me 1 second.
Parasite.
Parasite, yeah, it's coming from parasite. I'll tell you the meaning. It's like a poison, right? It is parasite means it's so it survives on something else, right? Which thrives on something else. It's like for instance, the religious leaders, they propagate some wrong things so that they can benefit from it. So they are parasite. They're a parasite. They're living off of something else.
Okay, yes. So this is a privilege to those professionals to deny the simple truth, but by denying the truth or getting privileged doesn't maintain the sanctity of dharma, and it is not a path of satya but hypocrisy. By hypocrisy some people get benefited, but that is not dharma, and the dharma is not maintained.
So I'll give you some examples so it becomes very clear. So we have the religious leaders in all the different religions, right? So these religious leaders, that is their profession. So they make money and they get prestige in the society from this profession. So the more they can misguide the society and keep the society in dark, the better off they are, right? So they are like parasites. So it may be a privilege to parasitic religious professionals. What does the parasite mean? Parasite means an organized organism with regard to the human body, means an organism which lives off another being, right? They are living off another being just to survive, right? They are not contributing to the welfare of that living being, but they're detracting. So if somebody has a parasite living in their gut, they're going to be sick. They're not going to be better off because of that. They're going to be sick. They're going to become weak. They may have issues, right? They may so they like that. There are parasites in the society, right? The religious professionals, they live off of the society. They suck the blood from the society for their own selfish goals. They make money, they make prestige. So this happens in all the religions. If somebody is going to, you know, another person and paying their money to find out, you know, that finally they find out that this person who's collecting money is actually has bad intentions, right? So then such a person is a parasite, right? He is actually living off another person, right? So Parama Purusha is equally present. He's always there everywhere. And like for instance, if people say that, you know, you go to a Tirtha Sthal, only there you can find Parama Purusha, if they say that, then that's a wrong teaching, right? That is a hypocrisy. Why do they say that? Because they want to make money in those places, right? So it is completely illogical. Parama Purusha is present everywhere, right? It's not that he is present only in a particular place. Everything is made of Parama Purusha. We have seen in the Srishti Chakra that everything is made of Parama Purusha. There is no place which is holy. There is no direction which is holy, right? Anybody who claims that this particular place is holy, then such a person is a parasite, right? They are misguiding the society, right? So the truth is, the satya is that everything is made of Parama Purusha. He is present everywhere. Every atom in this universe, every element in this universe, everything is made of this Parama Purusha. He is there every minute, every second, right? There is no time where there is no direction, there is no place that is more holy, right? As everything is made of Parama Purusha. So how could one thing be more holier than the other thing if Parama Purusha is present everywhere, right? So if people misguide you based on these things, then those people are all parasites, and they are not, the sanctity of dharma cannot be maintained because of that. The sacredness of dharma cannot be maintained because it is not the path of satya. It is only hypocrisy, right? It's only hypocrisy. So also, people say different things, right? They propagate different things, different stories, and make people to believe. But ultimately those are all false things. They are all limitations of the mind. They're dogmas, bhava jadata. And the subject of brahmacharya that we are talking over here means brahmani vicharanam. Everything is made of Brahma. There is not one thing in this universe which is not made of Brahma. We can't say something is made of more Brahma and something is made of less Brahma. Everything is made of Brahma. There is no other ingredient, right? We are to live such a life which is supportive of realizing the infinite within us, right? In order to that, we should not accept any limiting principles which restrict our mind. When the mind's nature is to expand, the mind's nature is to go from the imperfection to perfection, and grasping these limiting concepts limits the mind, right? So we should not subscribe to these limiting ideas, right? So we are talking about accepting what is truth, right? So if there is no truth, then dharma cannot be maintained. These are all false speeches, and these things go against the dharma, and this is there in all the religions, no matter what, right? Which misguide the society. Okay, that is what is said over here, Bhagini. Okay, so with that this brahmacharya is over. Can you take one more paragraph? Aparigraha is the next, this one, yama. The fifth principle of yama is
Yes.
aparigraha.
Yes. In case of enjoyment of any material object, the control over the subjectivity is called brahmacharya, while the control over objectivity is aparigraha. Should I take the next one also?
Yeah.
Deha rakshitirikkatavo
देह
gata.
देह रक्ष अतिरिक्त भोग साधन अस्वीकारः अपरिग्रहः.
Okay. Non-indulgence in the enjoyment of such amenities and comforts of life are as are surplus for the prevention of life is a parigraha. For our existence, we require food, clothes, and also a house to live in. Provision for old age and money and cultivatable land for one's dependents are also essential. Therefore, a number of factors have to be taken into consideration to determine an individual's necessity for the preservation of life. It may be that the requirements of any two persons are not similar. It is therefore difficult to determine the minimum requirement for any particular person because it is entirely a relative factor. The minimum requirement of a person can, to some extent, be determined and decided by the society. Uh, in case of enjoyment of any material object, the control over the subjectivity is called brahmacharya and control over objectivity is apriya. We have to control our like desire for material things, and if we control subjectively then it is called brahmacharya, and like objectively yes or no type thing then it is aprigraha. And the sloka deha rakshita bhoga sadhana sadhana svikaro, it means that no that the comforts of life, amenities, uh, enjoyment, that non-indulgence in these all the comforts of life are Bhagini, what is superfluous? Superfluous?
Superfluous means not really required, just
Okay.
they are accumulating for your enjoyment. They are not required for the preservation of life. They are not really needed, but we are just acquiring them for our bhoga.
Okay. Okay. So, like, if we don't indulge in all those comforts and superfluous, then it will be a parigraha. We require food, cloth, house, and some money for old days, and some money for our dependents also. There are number of things that can be consideration into our necessity, and because everyone has different necessity, so it's hard to determine that minimum requirement that one particular person needs because everyone has their own necessities and needs, and it's a relative factor. The minimum requirement of a person can be Bhagini, can you explain that last line? The minimum requirement of a person can be determined and decided by society. Like this can be decided by himself only. Then why it's saying that decided by society?
So in one example we can think about is, like, for instance, right, in several years ago, nobody had any vehicles. Everybody was walking, right, from place A to B. Everybody walked. They didn't have any other amenities. They didn't have a vehicle or something. In today's world, everybody has a vehicle, right? In India, India also, if you see today's world, people have a vehicle for going from place to A to B. So now, having a vehicle, is it considered superfluous or a luxury, or is it an essential requirement, right? So in today's world, having a vehicle is actually a requirement, because you want to save time. If you were to walk to a distance, to a particular place, it's going to take you a lot of time. And instead, if you're going by a car or by a vehicle, by a motorbike or whatever, then you reach that place sooner. So in today's world, the society has changed. So based on the current system, so we can using a vehicle is not, cannot be considered as luxury, right? So if you want to, for Shivir, we are going from wherever our hometown, we are going to Varanasi. So if we were to go by bus, or if we were to go by train, it may be it may not be very expensive, but we choose to go by plane. So is that going by plane a luxury? In today's world, it is not a luxury, because we don't have time. We can use that time for other things, right? More value added things, right? So going by plane is not against aparigraha, right? So like that, if the society has changed, and a similar thing, if you have a a washing machine, in those days people used to wash clothes by hand, right? And today's world, everybody has a washing machine. So the question is having a washing machine superfluous, is not required for preservation of life? Is it a luxury? Means in today's world, it is not a luxury, it is a requirement. If people don't have the time and energy to wash the clothes by hand, so they wash by washing machine. So based on the society, having a washing machine is not a wrong thing, right? So that is what this actually means. So here the distinction between first paragraph, the distinction between brahmacharya and aparigraha is made, right? What is brahmacharya? Is when we look at any object of the world, any created entity in this world, and then we do the adhyaropa on that object, that this is an expression of that Paramapurusha. This is the Gunanvit Roop of that Paramapurusha. Even though it looks like a car or it looks like a person, but actually it is a Gunanvit form of Paramapurusha. It is nothing but a Paramapurusha. It is superimposed. It is the Brahmacharya is the Brahmacharya Bhava is a superimposition of that Bhava, taking that Bhava that this person in front of me is nothing but Purusha, right? So this whole universe is made of this Paramapurusha, and this Paramapurusha is everything in my life. That is the inner approach to dealing with all the objects of this world, right? By taking that Bhava of Brahmacharya, that leads to Vairagya. That mind will not be colored by the objects of this world. One will not develop moha. So that is the subjectivity, right? So subjectivity means ultimate Vishayi of everything in this universe is Paramapurusha. The Vishayas are all these objects of the world, and ultimate Vishayi is Paramapurusha. He is the ultimate subject, right? He is the ultimate subject. So he is one, and he has taken many forms in this universe. Paramapurusha is one, and he has taken the form of all these objects in this world. Taking that bhava is that brahmacharya, right? So that is the control over the subjectivity. It's called brahmacharya. So when we see any created object in this world, which is one of the many, we should understand that it is actually Paramapurusha in the form of that thing. It is a Gunanvit Purusha. So that is the outlook of brahmacharya, which means that the mind is not getting colored by those things. That means one does not develop moha, right? That one will not by nature be getting the desire to accumulate those things. So by following the brahmacharya, one will not have the desire to accumulate those things. So the control of the objectivity means how I deal with those actual objects, all those different names and forms in this world. How should my outlook be towards them as objects? Brahmacharya is to see that not as an object but as a Gunanvit Purusha, that is Paramapurusha, taking the form of a boy, girl, a car, or a book, or whatever, right? So everything that is in front of me is Paramapurusha, and I have to serve this relative entity which is before me, right? So whatever, maybe it is a food or a vehicle or whatever it may be. So the proper utilization of that thing will be the natural outcome of seeing it as a qualified Purusha. That Purusha is the goal of my life, and then the control of the objectivity, that is to see that now we are seeing the money as money. We are seeing the money as the money, that is the object and not the subject. The ultimate subject is Paramapurusha. So brahmacharya is superimposing that bhava on all the vishayas of the world. and we treat it as a vishaya. Generally in the world we think it as a bhoga, right? So but by following the brahmacharya, we will have a control over the objectivity. So we will not accumulate everything for bhoga. If I'm eating something, I'm just eating it for nutrition, I'm not eating it for bhoga. So then that is the proper use of food, right? So aparigraha is taking the objects of the world and having the outlook of not overutilizing them. It means deha raksha atirikta bhoga sadhana asvikara parigraha, right? So to protect our existence we need certain things. Deha raksha, right? For deha raksha means raksha of the body. We need certain things, right? Besides that, atirikta, besides that, I will not take anything for my bhoga, right? I will not have anything for my bhoga. That is the outlook we should have. Non-indulgence in the enjoyment of amenities and comforts of life that are superfluous, that are not actually required, that are not necessities, right? Superfluous means unnecessary for the preservation of life, right? That is what is aparigraha. So we live in this world, but our goal is not sense gratification from these things, right? We should take the minimum that is needed, only as much as needed for our existence, and not more than that, right? People accumulate a lot of things, right? Lot of money, lot of things, right? Beyond what is needed. They hoard things, right? Money is a limited resource in the world, right? And we will not hoard money in a way that nothing is left for others, right? So the same thing with all the objects of the world, right? So we can't say the same thing in the case of jnana. The more jnana we get, nobody else is going to be deprived. But in the case of things, the more we accumulate, other people are deprived of those things. By getting more and more, when you're engaged in spiritual sadhana, getting more and more in bliss, you're not depriving others of the ability to do the same, right? There's no problem there. There's no limitation in those fields, right? But in the case of the physical objects, the more you accumulate, you're depriving others. You're accumulating those things for your bhoga, right? So the true spiritual knowledge actually comes from sadhana, from getting the personal experience of Paramapurusha, not by memorizing any book, right? So that is what it's saying. In order to say what is required for preservation of life, we have to look at different factors. It may vary from individual to individual. It depends on where he is living, right? So no two persons requirement may be the same, right? So we have to take into account several factors, and I gave you some examples for that. So yeah, so only maintaining what is required for the preservation of life, that is what is called as aparigraha. Okay. Okay, any questions, Bhagini? We'll stop here.
No, Bhagini, everything is clear.
Okay. Okay, Bhagini, धन्यवादः, नमस्कारः.
धन्यवाद, Bhagini, नमस्कार.
नमस्कारः.